each one of us. The chairperson of the Dr. Sam Motsuenyane Rural Development Foundation, Paul Ntshabele, if you can come and make a couple of remarks, and thereafter we'll be calling on Dr. Ruel Khoza to give us the lecture. Paul, thank you.
Thank you, Ramolefe, Professor Tawana Cooper, CEO of African Bank, Ray Kennedy Bungani. Mr. Kennedy, I wouldn't have minded to give you some of my minutes for you to continue speaking, provided that you remember that the day you bring your big check when we finish our negotiations and look at our MOU. To Emeritus Professor Ruel Khoza, to our patron, Dr. Sam Motsuenyane, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, to Mahosi Arena, to our kings and queens that are here, and Abezite, Prince Buzabaze. You're welcome. In 1965, when Dr. Sam Motsuenyane came back from the United States after studying BSc agronomy, he was called by Siapara Nkwe, Kgosi Hendrik Makapane. The king of Bakhatla Bamosetla called Dr. Sam Motsuenyane upon hearing that he was one of the first agronomists, black agronomists to have studied in the United Nations, and he called him to a meeting in 1965. And he called him to a meeting to discuss the concern that he had about the land that he had. At that time, King Hendrik Makapane had 14 villages. And he called Dr. Sam Motsuenyane to a meeting and to engage the community to see what is it that could be done about the level of poverty in that village and the unproductive use of land. In 2015, I was one of the delegates that accompanied Dr. Sam 50 years later to the same village, called to a meeting by the great-grandson of Kgosi Hendrik Makapane, Kgosi Makapane. He called us to a meeting for the exact same reason as his great-grandfather 50 years called Dr. Sam, because at that time, in 2015, when he called us, the villages had grown from 14 to 32 villages. They have the Pinas River, they've got the Moretele River, which joins the Klipgat Dam. They've got some of the most productive soils, they've got water, but they are languishing in poverty, and they've got land that is lying fallow. On the 29th of October at the Reserve Bank, on the 29th of October in 2010, led by Minister Nkwiti and Judge Moseneke, the Dr. Sam Motsuenyane Foundation was formed. And it was formed particularly to answer the question which was posed 50 years down the line, to say, what is it that we're doing about the development of the marginalized and the majority of this country? What are we doing about the socioeconomic of the majority of our people? It was quite heartbreaking being in that meeting and listening to how Dr. Sam said 50 years when that meeting was held in 1965, there was so much hope, and there were so many dreams that were laid on the table. And equally so in 2015, 50 years later, we had the great-grandson share some of the same pains that his great-grandfather shared with our patron 50 years later. As a foundation, we very much concerned about the level of poverty in this country. We think one of the biggest challenges this country faces is poverty. And we all for economic growth, but not at the exclusion of the majority. In fact, we've learned, and we can learn from the Nordic countries, that economic growth can also mean equity. And as a foundation, we involved in various initiatives that seeks to address the question of poverty. But most importantly, to look at what is it that went wrong and what is it that can be done so that 50 years from now on, we don't have the same meeting that happens at Makapanstad. Lord knows how many villages it would be then, that would still be grappling with the issues of rural development. So at the heart of what we exist for as a foundation is to answer the question of poverty. I think many were taken aback about what happened in July, the 8 fateful days in July, but we as a foundation, we were not surprised given the Gini coefficient, given the level of unemployment, the level of food insecurity in this country. It was just a matter of time. And I think that was just a warning bullet. And this speaks mainly to the leadership of the black elite and the black political elite and the black decision makers. To say 27 years down the line, what have we done? Can we honestly reflect and say that we have been kind and honest to our people as far as development is concerned? The other issue which the foundation grapples with is the issue of productive use of land. I myself, I'm an agronomist, just like our patron. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to do well, I think one of the secrets is agronomy. And at the heart of the productive use of land, what the patron always reminds us is that black people were actually very good farmers. He was part of the Didierde system, where black people were part of the sharecropping system and they were quite successful at farming. And he always reminds us that the notion that black people cannot farm is a fallacy. Simply put, if you were studying IT in 1993 and you then were locked out of the development of any technological advances, and then I brought you back in 2021 and I wanted you to compete as a programmer with a 14-year-old kid in Korea, you stand no chance as far as the development is concerned. And that's what happened with the black race as far as the productive use of land is concerned and farming is concerned. And as a foundation, we've done a lot of work in facilitating access to markets, in facilitating training, in facilitating exchange of international workshops and trips to make sure that our farmers learn from the best practices outside the country. And we're quite excited as a foundation. Ramolefe, you wanted the 2 main announcements to be made. Unfortunately, we're not going to be making those announcements today. One of the announcements is the partnership, which is the MOU, which we're going to sign with the University of Pretoria, which we're going to have a separate day where we're going to outline what that partnership entails. But for us, it's exciting because we see ourselves as a foundation as the interface between all that is learned from the university with all the research. Professor Cooper spoke about impact research. We've always said we want research that's not just going to lie in the journals, in the libraries, but it's going to improve the lives of our people. And we also going to be using the technology that exists within the university to provide the university with a platform as an interface to reach the communities. And we're excited about the MOU that's going to extend beyond the life of the old man. Professor Cooper spoke about recognizing the patron while he's still alive. We're quite excited that that MOU is going to extend beyond many of us that are here, where the university will be partnering with the foundation to improve the lives of our people. And then we're also quite excited about the partnership with the African Bank, which is also going to be done at a separate event. And it is quite interesting. The other day, I'm part of a black middle class, quite well-educated group. And I said to them, I was with the founder of African Bank, and they laughed. They laughed because they first didn't believe that the founder of African Bank was black, but 2, that they didn't think that he's alive. So we're quite excited about what's going to come out of that partnership to inspire people so that they can know that it's possible for a black man to start a bank in this country. The patron always says to me, Paul, lepalwaki, meaning that, Paul, what is it that is so difficult? Because he says to me, Paul, lepalwaki, because you guys are in charge of the country. Why is it that you have so many, or not so many black companies listing on the JSE? If we could start a bank under apartheid, under very deprived conditions, why is it that you young fellas as black business, you're not even starting companies that can be listed in the JSE? So we're quite excited about the partnership with the African Bank and the entrepreneurship aspect that's going to come from that MOU. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've got a giant that's going to speak, so let me not go on. Thank you so much.